Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday, I think it is. It's one of those times where it's really hard to remember what day of the week it is. I am Tammy Thies. I am the founder and executive director of the Wildcat Sanctuary in Sandstone, Minnesota. I know most of you out there that are watching and following us. I'm so thankful to have you part of our extended family of supporters. And today we are going to do an Ask the Founder or Executive Director, and I'm going to answer the questions that you submitted that you wanted answered. A little bit about today is I'm from my home office, so I might have a cat or two approaching in the background. I've tried to bribe the dogs with bones so that they're out in the living room to keep things a little quiet. Many of you submitted questions via email as well as on the posts that were posted yesterday, and I'm so thankful for that. We've got a lot of questions to cover today, and so unfortunately I cannot see live comments as I'm doing the live post. So if you pose any questions today, I probably won't be able to answer them on this live post, but we can obviously try to go back in the comments and answer what we can. But you guys had a wide range of questions, and want to kind of start off with a lot of times people ask me, how did I start the sanctuary? It is a long story, so I'm not going to bore you all with it right now, but we do have a link on our website. Anything you have a question about that I can't answer today, definitely go to wildcatsanctuary.org. If you type in the search bar up in the corner, just put in the word you want and most things will come up. So I did post a little bit of evolution about the sanctuary. But my background is I went to school for advertising and journalism. I never went for a biology degree or anything like that. And while I was in the entertainment industry, I was really disheartened to see how animals were treated. In one particular case, a trainer came in with a tiger cub and black leopard, and I was really upset about how they were treated. I would say at first I was smitten, like everybody else, not knowing about the captive wildlife crisis. And as I asked further questions, I got really disheartened, enough so that I actually went back to the facility and offered to volunteer to help better the lives of the animals. And what I saw was so disheartening. These animals were kept in 10 by 10 pens in a pole barn, really nothing to do. Every time I volunteered, a new animal came and one left. At one turning point, the trainer actually asked volunteers to get dry ice ready because he was going to euthanize a tiger he felt was dangerous, that wouldn't walk on a leash for exhibit or commercials anymore, and then taxidermy that tiger. And that's when I reached out to what I had heard of as a sanctuary, actress Tippi Hedren, Shambhala in California, and said, what do we do? This is completely insane that this person can have tigers, leopards, cougars, everything else, and now he's just going to kill a non-working animal. And we found out that it was sadly legal at that time, and it was only $80 to have a permit. I have Kazoo, a little meowing cat that might join in right now, one of my house cats. And so at that point, Tippi said she would take that tiger if we could save it. We couldn't. And it wasn't soon thereafter that I asked Tippi what I could do. And she said, oops, sorry, honey, you can't walk across the keyboard. Nope. Sorry, I have to stay on this page. I have a cat being too helpful. And Tippi said, you can't just keep advocating for cats and sending them to sanctuaries, because sanctuaries were so overwhelmed at that time with calls and cats. So she convinced me to start my own, and the rest is history. I had to learn by going and visiting other sanctuaries and volunteering at places. And sadly, one of the first places I volunteered ended up being a bad guy. And I didn't know that for the longest time. I always say, if I knew now what I knew then, it would have been great, because I would have been able to look at paperwork and follow the trail of the animals coming and going and what was going on. But sadly, that person is still in business, still breeding and selling cats, still taking them out on leashes. People are still hiring him for exhibits. And it is this cycle of abuse that ours and all other accredited sanctuaries want to end. And it's why we're here. So the next question I got was, what's the advice if I want to start my own sanctuary? That's probably not a fair question to ask any founder of a sanctuary. If you get us founders in a room, we will probably all tell you that we would never start it again. We would be working in the cause, still advocating for big cats, but nobody told us what sacrifice it would be to start and run your own sanctuary. I think the biggest sacrifice is you get in it for the animals, to spend time rescuing, saving, and spending day-to-day time with those animals. And any founder will tell you, and director will tell you, that's not where we spend most of our time, because you can find qualified people to do that. Where we spend most of our time is fundraising, preparing taxes, trying to learn HR laws, zoning, trying to network and advocate on education and legislation. And so if you're a founder, by the time your organization is sustainable like ours, the founders are usually further away from the work than we ever intended. Yet we're still there every day, but I'm not a caretaker that gets to go feed, clean, water, and do operant conditioning. Do I regret that? I miss it, but I don't regret the amazing work we do. The other thing I can tell you is if you want to start your own rescue or anything, you need to know the business side. The animal love is not enough to keep you sustainable, especially during a crisis like this. You have to make sure that you know the business side, the legal side, the tax side, the HR side, everything. And it can be overwhelming as a startup. And I'll tell you, a lot of us sanctuaries have stumbled because there was no handbook. But we're getting better as an industry, and we're mentoring each other, and we're getting much more professionalized because it was such a new industry. So what, Kazoo, are you just meowing? I have a meower in the background. And then the next question somebody asks is, how did we find the location we're at? Well, I think this is a similar situation with most sanctuaries you'll find, is this was not our first location. This is actually our fourth location. And because we didn't realize we were going to grow this big. So I started in Atlanta, Georgia, and that was actually after volunteering here and meeting that exhibitor that really spiraled me into wanting to end the captive wildlife crisis. I ended up moving to Atlanta, Georgia, because Coca-Cola was hiring, and I was in their marketing department. So I started there with 10 cats, and then I decided I had to move home to Minnesota if I was going to run a nonprofit. I needed volunteers, I needed friends and family to support. You know, it was all of my initial money going into starting this nonprofit. So I moved home, and we moved to a small location with 10 acres and had a zoning dispute over Meanie, a very old tiger. They had approved rescue of a geriatric tiger, but when she outlived what the zoning board thought they wanted her in the township for, we had a zoning dispute. And we could have replaced her or rehomed her, but instead we chose to use our resources to find a new site that would allow us to grow and develop. It was one of the hardest things I went through, sleepless nights, scared that we'd lose zoning, and everywhere we went. We looked at 280 properties, and we actually went to zoning boards. We had the Minnesota Zoo supporting us. We had the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We had the Humane Society. And yet these zoning boards kept saying, we like what you do, but we don't want you to do it in our neighborhood. I actually had one zoning board member on the media say that a bullet in a cougar's head is cheaper and easier than our services. And that's what he would choose to do if they had an issue in their county with a pet cougar. So it was a struggle. So we ended up looking where zoning and planning allowed our use, which was good, but it's in the middle of nowhere, which makes it hard for volunteering. It makes it hard for employee recruitment. And because the use is allowed, we have some bad guys and have had some bad guys in the area. Some of the breeders, dealers, things like that. And so it hasn't been an easy road, but it's been a very, very rewarding road. So again, if you go to wildcatsanctuary.org and you type in how to start a sanctuary or the evolution of the sanctuary, you'll get great, more informative articles. I never want to deter somebody from starting a rescue or sanctuary, but I want you to go in it with eyes open, because we don't want these startups to be places that fail that we then have to rescue animals from. And that has happened. The other thing I'm cautious about always telling people how to start up a sanctuary, because I've learned early on that there are people that just want a collection of tigers and leopards as their own, and yet they want to guise it under a sanctuary or something that they think will be socially acceptable, but it's really not going to be a rescue organization. So I'm very cautious of that as well. Let's see, more questions. Kazoo, honey, you can't come here. You can come sit on my lap if you want to meow. Somebody asked about succession planning. Given the current crisis and everything else, what is our sanctuary's plan if something were to happen to me? I will tell you one thing. I feel very blessed and humbled that all of you think I am TWS. The reality is, it is a team effort. We have outstanding staff, a great dedicated board of directors, volunteers. It is not just me. And early on, I always wanted the sanctuary to be bigger than me, to be here for the cats, even if I'm not. I was crazy, but when I started the sanctuary at 29, one of the first things I did is take out a life insurance policy on myself as TWS as the benefactor in case something happened to me, because I know nobody else was going to do all that work for free, which I was doing at the time, as every startup. And you know, over the years, we've built that. We have a wonderful operations director. We have lead caretakers. We have people working in the development office. So we have the management and the infrastructure in place if something were to happen to me. My biggest thing I'm stringent about, and so are my leadership staff, is that our mission stay intact. The one thing we don't want happening is our mission changing because I'm gone for whatever reason. TWS is TWS and will always be TWS because of our supporters and all of you that really support the mission we have, and we don't ever want to change the mission of the organization. That doesn't mean we don't evolve and change with the times, but it means we stay true to who TWS is. All right, so another question that came in is, what is operant conditioning? Why do we do it? And how did we get trained? So for those of you that might not know what operant conditioning is, and it sounds like training cats, that's really not what it is. What it is when cats come into captivity for a variety of reasons, many of them we have to get into neutral because they come to us from negative situations. And we can't just start expecting them to shift into their building for us to clean, or actually approach the fence for any type of physical examination. And so operant conditioning is a way where you get voluntary cooperation of an animal for some type of motion or movement. It is not commanding them. It is not tricking them. It is not withholding reward or food. It is rewarding them when they choose to participate. And so those bridges are built really small. So at the sanctuary, we've now twice brought in a professional animal behaviorist from a company called Creative Animal Behavior Solutions to work with our staff, our special needs cats, and to talk about building a program for those cats that need it. So not only does it mean cats that were really fractious or hitting the fence can now sit down calm with their caretaker, and we can look at observations, look at how they're doing, things like that. But it also means the animals cognitively engaged. So cats like Shazam that are so smart, that leopard, he needs a lot of activity. You can't burn his energy off with just physical activity. He needs mental stimulation. So when he has to go sit at a station for food and be calm, or touch his nose to a target, that's really stimulating his mind, and it's also calming his behavior, so it's safer for him and the caretaker to work together. And operant conditioning is 100% built on trust and patience. And so some cats choose not to cooperate and walk away that day. They still get their meal. They still get everything. But those training bowls are smaller pieces, so they get more frequent rewards. And you'll see we use a whistle or clicker as a bridge so that they get acknowledgement right away that they did what we were asking them to do, and giving them time to get a piece of food. So I hope that answers. We usually start operant conditioning with cats that have a trouble shifting, like they don't like their lockouts for whatever reason. They might have come from a small enclosure, they might be afraid from the door, or cats that are really high energy and need a lot more mental stimulation. All right, here's another big one. So people are asking, what is the difference between being an accredited sanctuary and a not accredited? With Tiger King, there's a lot of, how do I know who's a good guy and bad guy? So being an accredited sanctuary, whether it's through the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries or the American Sanctuary Association, they have a set of guidelines. And those universal guidelines are really that you do not breed, you do not buy, trade, or sell animals. And that is really at the heart of every sanctuary. Sanctuaries do something a little different. Some are open to the public, some different species, different education programs, but at the heart of it, we don't buy, breed, trade, or sell. We are trying to be a solution to the problem, not contributing to the problem. So through accreditation, not only are you meeting those guidelines, but we're meeting guidelines for acquisition and disposition, meaning we're getting animals ethically. And if we have to move an animal somewhere else, we're really a home for life. So the only reason you move animals somewhere else if there's a better qualified sanctuary for that animal's particular needs, or you're at capacity and we're just facilitating the transfer of the animal from the owner to another sanctuary. So then people ask, what's the difference between accredited sanctuary and accredited zoos? Again, accredited sanctuaries are meeting guidelines of home for life and rescue. Accredited zoos, like the AZA accreditation, American Zoological and Aquarium Association, is similar, where they have higher standards of animal care, safety, disposition. And so the AZA zoos are zoos that when you're supporting zoos, you want to look for that badge and support them. There are also, as a secondary accreditation of zoos, called ZAA. ZAA was pretty much formed, in my opinion, for those that could not meet AZA criteria and those that did not want to meet AZA criteria, because AZA zoos do not support public breeding of tigers and wild animals like you saw in Tiger King. Unfortunately, ZAA does. Many of those accredited by ZAA are private owners, private collectors, and they sell to the general public. And so that's why we do not support ZAA and their practices at all. And then somebody asked, then what's the difference between that and Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance? Well, the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance is a bunch of us accredited sanctuaries that got together to speak in one voice, to work together, to network together, to be able to advocate together. So it's a working group. We also have conferences and share each other's knowledge, crisis plans, posing questions for the industry, things like that. So it's not an accreditation, it's a membership of like-minded people working together. And that was the next question is, do we have good relationships with other sanctuaries, or is it competitive because of donations? Years ago, sanctuaries really operated autonomously. And when I came into the industry, I was naive, I was young, I didn't know there were bad feelings in the industry like there isn't any. And I went and visited almost every place I could to learn from them. And learned pretty quickly that these are all amazing, dedicated people that really we just didn't have social media and ways to connect with each other. So after a large-scale rescue in 2006, when the Wild Animal Orphanage in Texas closed down, it needed all these sanctuaries. So the Wild Animal Sanctuary came in and helped did food. I flew down there and was placement coordinator with the caretakers, assessed the animals, started networking for credible places for the animals to go when it was closing down. International Fund for Animal Welfare helped pay for electricity and stuff to keep the lights on. And that was really a turning point for the industry when everybody came together and worked as a team. And after that, all the other sanctuaries saw value in it. And over the years, we just keep building and building our relationships. So I don't see that we have competition with each other. I think we really try and work hard together, and sometimes that can be challenging. But I always look at it as, I know our supporters support other big cat sanctuaries, and I love that. I love that they do that. I love that they support the good places. They also support dog and cat rescues. And you know what? It should be that way. I don't want a donor that specifically only gives to me and hates other sanctuaries. We're all doing the same work. Now I have a dog at the door. And so we don't see the competition like we used to. There can sometimes be confusion, and I think the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance has helped that with placement. So if somebody calls and wants to surrender their tiger, they usually blanket an email every sanctuary, and then we might be overstepping each other and wasting our time. So the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance has a rescue committee, which I am chair of, and other sanctuaries are members of, and now those requests funnel through me. We have a set of criteria. If there's a credible sanctuary in close proximity with an open habitat, not a temporary habitat, then that's where we'll call for that sanctuary. So kind of leading into a next question is, somebody said, how do we decide what cats we take in and what we don't? All sanctuaries kind of have a standard of conduct, and they might be a little different. But ours is, unless we're ending a cycle, we will not take that cat in. So for example, the Brown Zoo in Illinois, I can name it, they were in Tiger King. They do cub petting all the time. And every season, then they dump their cats. They won't say they dump, they say that they place cats. Well, there's a few non-accredited sanctuaries that agree to take in their cubs after every cub petting pet session. I can see that some people think, well, we don't want something bad to happen to them, but yet that facility is really being a dumping grounds and enabling that cub petter to continue doing their work. So we sometimes have to make hard decisions. We would not take a cub there, and we would not contract officially or unofficially with any type of breeding cub petting industry to say, hey, hand us your surplus when you're done making money so that now you have space to breed and do more. That's unethical, and I think most accredited sanctuaries would say that's not stopping a cycle, and we have to. So if a person is surrendering a cat and they won't get another exotic and they sign our release form saying that, we'll take the cat. If they're shutting down a facility, we'll take those cats. If they're downsizing and then they sign the contract that they won't increase their count again, we might help. So we do have stipulations. Obviously our priority is wild cats, but we are one of the few sanctuaries that takes the domestic hybrids like servals and Chassies and Bengals. And those can be harder to decide what we take in and not take in. But usually our filter for that is that they cannot be in a home environment. It's already been tried. They've already been through domestic cat rescue and deemed not appropriate for adoption. We don't want to take in cats that can be adopted. Now, on occasion, we get a few cats like Daisy, the little Bengal, that was kind of an emergency situation, and she ended up being adoptable, and she's going to a staff member. We don't adopt generally to the public. If we have a stray domestic cat that shows up at the sanctuary, which we do, those will adopt out, but we're not a formal adoption agency by any means. And so sometimes we just have to know because we're at capacity, especially with the hybrids. But people ask, when do we have space and when don't we? So right now it is a unique time in the sanctuary world where most sanctuaries have space. 10 years ago, we were all bursting at the seams, and it was almost like negotiating. Can you please take one more tiger? We'll drive it to you. We'll help you fundraise. Now we all have space because we had a geriatric population, because the industry is about 25 years old, 30 years old, that passed away and has left spaces. So there is capacity to rescue at our sanctuary as well as a lot of others. And so there is no reason why an animal should go to a substandard facility or be passed around by these exhibitors when sanctuaries that are accredited have space and can provide care. At the Wildcat Sanctuary, we designed our facility to be a 100 animal facility. But really depending upon what can rescue, depends upon if we can be at the 130 mark, 105 mark, because it depends upon who's housed together, who's housed alone, what special needs. So no two tigers are the same. But if we rescued 3 tigers together, that only takes 1 habitat versus a bunch of singles. We do merge, but not out of necessity to save space. That is wrong and an error, and I get very frustrated when I see it. There are sanctuaries that do not merge cats, which is not wrong. Most of them are solitary in the wild. And there's sanctuaries that merge cats together, which is not wrong either, to give them companionship of their own kind and give them more stimulation in a captive environment. So I'll just tell you that I always say helping animals and running a sanctuary is much like being a parent. There is more than one right way to do it, but when you see when you see it being done wrong, you know very clearly. All right. I can't even believe how many questions. So somebody asked a question which I was very confused about a little bit, is why is breeding allowed in some rescue circles? Well, if you go back to that accreditation, if they're breeding, they are not rescue. They might say they are. They might say they're a sanctuary, but they are not. There is no breeding allowed at accredited sanctuaries. The only time you might see something happen is when a facility rescues pregnant females, or a breeder is closed down and a big influx of, let's say, if Joe Exotic cats went to sanctuaries, they might already be pregnant. But that is the rarity over not being rare. Sanctuaries will either house sexes separately. At our sanctuary, we neuter all the males. We spay the majority of the females unless there's a health or age-related reason. And then with lions, because we don't want the males to drop their mane, we will either vasectomize the males, spay, or implant the female. So, you know, zoos are a different beast because they're not a sanctuary. Even accredited zoos will breed, but they are not signing on to the guidelines of accreditation to not buy, breed, trade, or sell and be a home for life like sanctuaries are. Doesn't mean their mission is bad. It just means it's different. And so then somebody asked, what are our opinions of zoos? There's good and bad in every industry. There's ethical and unethical in every industry. What I tell my interns is, don't be afraid to go work at a zoo, because change happens from within. If you have good people working around animals, even though you might be a caretaker at a large zoo and might not get to take all the decisions, we need better people and good people continuing to go into all walks of animal life to change the systems from inside and out. So there are zoos that we have high respect for and love their programs, and we have zoos that we, don't have respect for because we know where they've bought animals or where they've sold animals. So I don't think you can say a blanket statement, just like you can't with sanctuaries or cat rescue. I think you have to evaluate every facility as an individual. All right, so somebody asked, Why, or is there a discussion for the sanctuaries to get together and do a good documentary like Blackfish versus this Tiger King? Well, I will tell you, there has been several attempts by producers and directors, but because they're doing the good work and the real work, it is not sensational TV. It can be a long and hard process. The Elephant in the Living Room by Mike Weber and Tim Harrison is a great example of that. It shows the captive wildlife crisis so much, and we got so much promotion for it, and it didn't get as much traction as Tiger King because it's not sensationalized. It is telling you the truth, taking you along the journey of what our work is like as rescuers, and we're not going to allow for the animals to suffer or be exploited, or even the humans that care for them. So that can be challenging. There's also another one that was out called The Hidden Tiger that we participated in. Also a good one that went for awards in the wildlife community, but never made it mainstream because it's not sensational. So do we wish there was a captive wildlife crisis Blackfish? Yes. But we've had several attempts, and the public isn't grasping to it, but we're not giving up on communicating that message, communicating that Tiger King missed the mark. They focused on characters and not the issue. We are not going to give up fighting for the Big Cat Public Safety Act to make sure we get a federal bill that stops this abuse of big cats. And so funding is another thing. Doing these productions is expensive and time consuming. And so when we're doing all the work we're doing to try and fund that is challenging as well. Okay, Kazoo, honey, come here. Do you want to say hi to everybody? Because all you're doing is meowing. Oops, a big meow. This is Kazoo who's making all the noise. She wants treats and she wants out. I'm gonna let her out real quick. You can go out. You can go out. All right, now we have quiet because she wanted treats and food and my door was shut. So, as you know, we always have to do what the cats want. So as I mentioned again, just a little bit of admin stuff. I can't answer questions that you are putting in the comments because I barely see them. I see them about 10 minutes later, and we don't have a lot of time. So Judson will go back and answer those probably in line, but unfortunately I've got a list here that I promised those who submitted yesterday and the day before I would get to, and we're only on page 1, guys. All right, so surrender. Again, we kind of talked about this. How we decide what animals we take in, it is really, we have to stop a cycle. It cannot negatively impact any of our residents or staff at TWS. So we have had a call on a very rare cat, a cheetah at one point, but it had such an infectious disease that we chose, we were not the facility set up for it because of how our quarantine was set up, and that if we had to quarantine the animal, that we didn't have the right setup to give a quality of life for that cheetah because of its health condition. So we don't just turn our backs. Then we also reach out to other facilities. As placement coordinator, I've done it for the Wildcat Sanctuary all the time, but now with the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance, I'm helping facilitate that as well. So we always say no wildcat left behind. We reach out to other sanctuaries. We try and do our best to find them homes. So when would we be full and say no to more, cats? Well, right now we aren't full. We are full on certain species. So our hybrid area is really full because we have so many that want to live alone, and we're not going to force them to live with other cats. But we have to be very careful about what cats we take in. And usually those are in a public safety issue for the cat or for the owner, like Tiger, who we just took in because of his aggression and biting and a sick child in the home. We determined we would find a way to make that work. And so far he's doing great, and we have. Somebody says, do you let the owners visit? Well, in the early years we did, But we learned a couple of things. The cats might get excited to see the owner and then go off food when the owner left, because much like if you adopt a cat from a shelter, you don't let the previous owners visit all the time, and we're not open to the public. And if we had 100+ owners visiting every year, that's pretty disruptive. We also think that you guys are financially supporting that surrendered cat. You guys are making sure they get food, water, habitats. And if the owners aren't financially supporting the animal, then we should not allow them to come on site. We definitely would give them updates. We definitely send them, photos if they request. We encourage them to sponsor. But the reality is we do what's right for the animal. And the animal needs to know it's in a new home, a new environment, and it needs to adjust versus having confusion. And so over the years, when we've allowed it on rare occasion, we had somebody jump the fence and decided they were going to try and stick their arms in their cougar enclosure. It was Spring the cougar. And we let him in for a tour, but he jumped the barrier fence and tried to do that. Spring didn't even recognize him or care, and Spring had a hard time adjusting when he first came at the sanctuary. And we had to escort that person off the property, and their response was, I don't care. If I got to touch him one more time. Well, that's a public safety risk, and that's a selfish response, because we put the animals first. We also really want the owners to know not every owner is the same. So there are owners like Tigger's owner that reaches out every day. And of course, in that situation, we are going to give her updates. If it's an abusive situation, no, we cut the ties. With Callie, Caesar, and Logan and Shadow, that was a special situation. So we negotiated with Steve that he could come see them. He hasn't, he calls. So it's not blanket, but it is on average. We can't accommodate it, and if it's not in the best interest of the cat, that's where our focus is. So, I think that was the other thing, is how do we decide if we're taking and replacing a cat? For example, we got a call from USDA on 2 tigers in Oklahoma that needed a home. Yes, we have space at our sanctuary, and we have big cat habitats open, and we could, but was it in the cat's best interest when we had other facilities, accredited sanctuaries like Turpentine Creek, that is wonderful. They had open capacity. They were willing to drive there on a moment's notice, and those cats could get to their forever home quicker. That was in the best interest of the cat, and part of our protocol for placement is that there was a sanctuary closer with a permanent habitat and a great staff, and so that's why we decided that they should go as part of the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance criteria. And so we always decide that. Sometimes the owner will only surrender to one sanctuary, and then we abide by that owner to get the animals to a safe place. All right, so cats. So some people had some questions about specific cats that are at our sanctuary or not. So let's first, so somebody asked why, or have we ever considered merging Shadow and Shazam? I know because they're male and female and black leopards that everybody wants them together. The reality is Shadow does not like other cats. She never has, even at her previous owner's house. He had to have her away from the other cats when he had her on a shared wall with his first leopard. She just was really testy. Shadow likes people. She's imprinted a little bit on people and not other animals. Shazam tends to be a wild card, as you guys know. So it's not just looking at putting species together. It's looking at personalities, the history that the owner gave us, really observations. Mohan is about the only cat that can live calmly next to Shadow because he ignores her. But when Daisy was there, there was so much commotion at the fence and so much irritating each other that we had to move them apart. So no, we are not going to be ever merging Shadow or Shazam with another cat. They both showed us that Shazam likes tigers and he likes to have it along the shared wall. So we are looking at moves this summer of maybe who can move next to Shazam so he gets some stimulation since Nikita passed away. People asked if Mohan or Shanti, how are they doing? There are older geriatrics. And Shanti, hopefully, will be moving by the end of the month down to Pride Prairie, since Miss Sultania left us and passed away. We are thinking of putting Shanti Diva next to Chipino, which will be a much slower process of having a visual barrier, taking it down, and things like that. And Mohan didn't have to move to quarantine this winter. He's still down in his big habitat. He's been doing so well. We know at old age, anything can happen and anything can change. So, and somebody's trying to, sorry, I am interjecting now because somebody's asking the Illinois Zoo that was dumping cubs. It is not an AZA accredited zoo, so please don't give any of the AZA zoos a bad name. It is a roadside zoo. So somebody's asked, do the cats recognize their siblings like Leo and Mama? I don't know. That's something that the cats know and I'll never know. So I've had siblings want to kill each other. I've had siblings like each other after reunited. So again, we really look at more of their personality and behavior versus genetics and species when we do play dates and mergers. Sky and Celine, the two bobcat kittens, was one great way to talk about is that those two had a fight and it went really bad for quite a few days, but their merger, again, which was a slow, steady, really carefully monitored merger, has gone great, so they're doing well. Somebody asked about Lily the tiger and not Titan and Lily had. Lily was a tiger cub mascot at a high school that we watched very carefully, was sold by Stump Hill. And we did a lot of undercover footage with some volunteers there. And it is a cat we spent 3 to 4 years trying to rescue. She had been maimed and hurt. She was hidden in a shed. And then she disappeared for a while. And we found out that she ended up at Summer Wind Farms, where Mohan and Daisy came from. We really wanted to rescue her and the other cats and really tried to work with the owner when we got Mohan and Daisy, and they would not let Lily go at the time. After that, the USDA forced them to give up cats, and Lily did go to a non-accredited sanctuary, but a sanctuary that takes good care of their animals and does not breed. So we wish she was at TWS. She's not, but we're very thankful she's at Sanctuary. And so we are... there's only about 1 or 2 facilities that aren't accredited that I would say do a good job of rescue, and this is one of them. So I'm glad she's finally safe. So people asked about her. And then the Witness Protection Program. People are saying, what is it? We never heard of it. Why can't you tell us about the cats? And here is what it is. So in any court case, whether it be they're closing a roadside zoo down, whether a person has a cat illegally, or whether they didn't refile permits, it could be a dozen reasons why an animal is seized. And if the owner contests, there's a legal process, and that can be as short as 10 days or as long as 2 to 4 years, kind of like a divorce. The bigger the case, meaning if it's like a larger zoo that shut down, the longer the cases. You might have heard of like Cricket Hollow Zoo and the Tri-State Zoo. Those were cases that are now out in the public that took several years to shut down. And if you're watching Wildlife in Need, which is in Tim Stark, which was in Tiger King, there's an attorney general court case going on there. These can take a lot of time. So sometimes the animals are left at the property during that procedure, and other times for safety of the animal, those animals are seized either by a state agency, USDA, local sheriff, whoever has authority. And during that proceeding, they're placed at a facility for care during that court case. We don't legally own those animals. They're in the possession of the state or authority. And we are housing them usually, not always, but usually at 100% our cost. We are doing the transport usually at our cost. Sometimes we might get smaller reimbursements, but we cannot post about those cats. We cannot mention their species for a couple things. One is they might not want the owner to know where they are for our and the cat's safety. The second is if we post anything, even if we gave them a fake name or something, that can be used in the case for or against what we're fighting for. So for an example, if we got a really decrepit older cougar that had arthritis or something, and we show a picture after we've done treatment and laser therapy and pain meds and got weight off, and he was looking great, you would think in your mind we did a great job. But what the owner would do is put that up in court and say, look at how healthy this cat is. There's nothing wrong with him. I should get him back. I did nothing wrong. So that's why we can't say, and hopefully at the end of a court case, the judge rules that the disposition goes to the sanctuary and that we can then announce that we have them. Now, on rare occasion, like Tri-State in, I think it's New York, they went to the Wild Animal Sanctuary, but that wasn't the court that went public with that. That was the zoo who had their tigers seized and lions seized. They went public with where they were going. And so that's why that one's out in the open. But I also know that that sanctuary is being very cautious of what they post too, because we have to be respectful of the legal system and always hope that the judges rule in favor of the animals. So I hope that helps that. Somebody asked, what made us decide to be a no-tour, no-touch facility? Well, sanctuaries, including ours, have evolved over the years. It used to be a world of free contact, meaning some people would go in with smaller cats, some would even go in with cougars, and so on and so on. Over the years, we've all realized that it's really hard to preach and then do the opposite, right? So we know if we were in the early years with a bobcat that snagged us or bit us, we weren't going to go dump it somewhere like a private owner might. But it didn't make sense for us to be saying one message and giving a different visual. So we've never interacted with tigers or bigger at TWS in the early years. Yes, we interacted with servals and things like that, but we learned early on that if they imprinted so much on us, I call it, they couldn't self-soothe. During the day, they would pine for human contact. And this is what I see with private owners a lot too, is that you might spend an hour, maybe a day with your cougar out in the backyard, and it's sitting there 23 hours by itself. And so when you come up, it's purring and it's rubbing and it's acting all excited, but what life does it have outside of that hour? So we really changed our philosophy of trying to do pairing, having them live communally or on shared walls, so that, and doing enrichment and doing operant conditioning so that they have stimulation and have their own quality of life outside needing our contact. And it served us and the animals well. And so the No Tours facility, really that started, we're in the middle of nowhere. It's hard for people to get to us. Even when we have volunteers, they can be an hour late because of traffic. It was so hard to manage. We also were known for taking in some of the toughest behavioral cases where we would have to, you know, it might take 6 months to a year to get them used to a caretaker. It wouldn't be fair to bring the public through. Now, some sanctuaries have on and off kind of tours, which totally makes sense, and they can do that. But as we started up, we didn't have that, and we really chose to be there for the animals. That doesn't mean that sanctuaries that do tours aren't there. They are. It's just a different philosophy. And so we chose to keep it for the animals, to keep our focus. I seriously don't know how other people do tours and get all the work done. I have a dog scratching at the door. And so it's been a personal choice of ours. We also understand that donors need to see where their money's going. And luckily with videos and live posts, we can do that. We are not exclusive. You can't come on site. We have a volunteer program, an intern program, but we made it clear that anybody that comes on site at the sanctuary is there to benefit the animals, not to fulfill a personal need. So care of the cats. Some people are asking, oh, you're in the woods of Minnesota. What do you do about fleas and ticks? Luckily, we've never had a flea problem with any of our cats. They're good groomers. The younger cats, we don't have tick problems, even though we have a lot of ticks in Minnesota, because they're good groomers as well. But our older cats that don't groom as well or have been declawed by former owners will get some Frontline Plus, and that operant conditioning is great, where they come along the fence line and the keeper can stick it through the fence. We also will treat around the habitats with diatomaceous earth to help be a barrier for some of the ticks. So that's not a problem. Somebody asked, okay, I scoop my litter box at home. You guys must scoop a lot of poop, and where does it go? The good news is cats are very efficient in their digestion. And so unlike dogs and unlike our pets, who we feed them a lot of food with filler and they poop a lot, big cats really use a lot of everything they're eating. And so there isn't a lot of feces. They probably go once a day. And our staff, because our habitats are so large, only have to clean about 3 days a week. Indoors and 3 days a week outdoors, and then we do have that all removed in a dumpster. It can't go on, sadly, like fields or anything like that, because it's not cow. It is a predator's poop, but it's not as much as you'd think. That was a fun question. And then somebody asked, how do we decide what each cat needs, how much space, how much enrichment? You know, every sanctuary is different. I will tell you that most of the space the cats have at sanctuaries is really restricted by funding. It is not that the cat doesn't need more space. I think in all of our opinions, young, healthy cats should have way more space than even the best sanctuary can provide. We cannot duplicate what is in the wild, but we do the best we can. And at the sanctuary, we started out really as a smaller cat specialist before we started taking in cougars and tigers. And we realized back about 15 years ago is a lot of sanctuaries gave their big cats a lot of space because that made sense. But the smaller cats didn't have space. That's changed, luckily. But we really focused on giving our small cats just as much square footage per the size of the cat as the big cats. And it's been great. That means we have to have open-topped enclosures with recurve, because if you roof, it can be very expensive and time-consuming and snow loads. But we have a variety of opened and closed-top enclosures based on the age of the cat, who climbs, things like that. We have an enrichment program, so we're always trying to come up with new things. It's on a schedule, so all cats get enrichment, but we also have an overlap for those cats that live alone, that are solitary, and those that might be doing atypical behaviors, whether they're sucking their tail a little bit because they just maybe lost a cage mate, or they're inside more, or they have arthritis, so they're not moving around as much. So we look at every animal as an individual, an individualized care plan, from diet to medication to enrichment to operant conditioning to even socialization. If there's a cat that really the best way to make them happy is to have more caretaker time, then we want to accommodate that. Somebody asked, do we have any of Joe Exotic's cubs? I'm really worried about where Joe Exotic's cubs went. Well, he's had so many cubs, and when he had 200 breeding tigers, luckily 40 of those cats went to the Wild Animal Sanctuary in Colorado that were tied to the Dade City, Florida case. But before Joe retired and the series made him look like he had a change of heart, he shipped out so many of them to the bad guys and to other menageries just like his, and made a profit. Only the old guys that were left, and then Jeff Lowe tried to absorb those. We don't, in our knowledge, have a direct cat from Joe Exotic. We do have cats that were originated from the other bad guys on the show, and we're not going to call that out specifically who. But you have to remember, sanctuaries are usually not a cat's second home. We're usually the fourth or fifth home. So Nikita is the cat that originated from one of those horrible breeders. That breeder sold them to a huge exploiter, Sam Mozala, who also did bear wrestling. He chained Nikita and others down for photo opportunities. Even a caretaker we talked to talks about how she was hit with baseball bats and the end of fire extinguishers when she didn't do what she was supposed to. Then she went to a woman after Sam died that really tried to help her in Ohio, and Ohio laws got passed, and that wonderful lady reached out to reputable sanctuaries to place all the cats she had. So when you look at the cycle of abuse, it doesn't go from bad guy to good guy. It is sadly a cycle, and sadly these cats have been through a lot. What's my most memorable rescue? God, they all are so individual. And I will tell you, when I forget one and it comes back in my mind, I almost tear up and I feel guilty that I can't remember them all with as much detail as I used to. But I will never forget, we got a call to go rescue 5 cougars from Iowa. We drove down there, and it was cruelty neglect, and we had walked to this back where it was lush green everywhere, and then you saw these little teeny cages, maybe 10 by 20 and 4 feet high, and they were all just dirt and poop because they didn't get any of the lush green. They wore it down. And sadly, what we saw was carcass of a cougar, skull of a cougar, just piles and piles of feces. And we saw one cougar still alive, and we named her Hope. And she was extremely emaciated, and we think the only reason she survived is because she didn't have a tarp on her enclosure, so rainwater collected in her bowl. And I remember driving her back, and she had a thick collar on her neck, and being told by our vet that she probably wouldn't make it, that her emaciation was so far gone. And she became a plump, beautiful girl and was with us for several years. And I actually had to get deposed for that case. And that owner had tried to say we were doing everything wrong and that they were skinny because he was deworming them, even though they were all dead. Luckily, we took the skulls and everything to prove that. He also said then he shot them, which he said he could do because they were his own cats. There was no bullet holes. I mean, we had to prove that they starved to death. And sadly, the reason he wanted the one survivor back. Luckily, Hope didn't go back, but he only got prosecuted for a misdemeanor of improper disposal of carcasses. So the system can break your heart sometimes, but my goal was that Hope didn't get to go back. And if you go to our website, Hope and her rescue stories and photos are there. So I encourage you to go, because I do think the one thing is it's every cat live that's saved. The story needs to be told to prevent more cats from having the same future. Alrighty, I think I've just got a couple more, and then if we need to do this next week and there's more questions, I'll do it next week. So will the captive wildlife crisis end in our lifetime? Sadly, no. So the breeders laugh at us and say we want to put ourselves out of business. And they're like, that's crazy. You're raising money. You just say that. No, we do. But we are also very understanding that the wave of justice turns slowly. Things have gotten better. We need to get the Big Cat Public Safety Act passed to have a federal bill, and it only affects cougars and biggers, so we still have to do more work on the small cats, but we need to start somewhere, and we need to stop the cub petting and the cub selfies. So will it all end in our time? No, but I have seen it got better. And as much as I hate the Tiger King docuseries, I hate COVID-19, and before that started, things were in the works. The dominoes were falling on the bad guys, and we hope we continue that fight, and we hope we see those dominoes fall, because we need to have these bad guys shut down. We need to stop the abuse, stop the overbreeding, stop confining tigers to teeny enclosures, and stop selling them across state lines to the next cub petter, private owner, or anybody that will buy them. It's just sad. So I think we have one more question. That's a marketing question. Is would we ever consider having people add designs to our online store, t-shirts and things like that? We love ideas. The problem is, I think people don't realize, is we are a very, very small organization that does a lot because of you guys. We have 11 paid staff. Only 2 of those are full-time for social media, all social media, and all online store. So submitting a design is an easy part, but we also then have to upload it, refine it, put it on products. When people's products don't come through, we have to fulfill the request to refund it and everything else. So it works for Big Cat Rescue because they have, as Carol says, dozens and dozens of people working on social media, and they have a population of, they're going by economies of scale. More products they sell, because you're only making maybe 10 to 20% on a product, theirs is economies of scale. We aren't there yet, so we would love to have more on our on-site store, but our on-site store maybe raises us $10,000 to $15,000 net a year when we have a 2.0 million budget. So to put a lot of time into that is hard. We would love to do that. We just have to choose what is the most successful for us with the resources we have. So right now our store is what it is. We hope you support it. We will have the calendar this year. Well, we're at the hour mark, so I'm going to sign off. We can do this again next week with more questions. I just want to thank you all for your support. We owe it to you that we get to do what we do, and we never underestimate what you can do. Miracle Match is still going on. You can imagine donations are affected by COVID-19. So if you guys can still give, Miracle Match is through April 30th. So don't miss that opportunity where your donation goes twice as far. Also, we're, everybody that gives a donation during Miracle Match gets entered into a tour for 2 with me and a keeper at the sanctuary. We'll obviously accommodate timing based on COVID-19 and when it has to happen, even if next year. And anybody that gets 100 or more gets that special gift pack drawing. So you don't get it, but you get entered into a drawing for that paw print, that Shazam frame, the photo book from Judson, some magnets, things like that. So we're trying to make it worth your while to give and trying to do some small things to give back to all of you. I just can't thank you enough. And the best thing is sign up for our e-newsletter. Our e-newsletter, we go out once to twice a week. It's giving you as much information on your residents, more photos, videos than you see on Facebook. There's YouTube, there's Instagram, and of course we'll always be here on Facebook. But thank you all so much. And again, if you have additional questions, we can do this in the future again, because we want to be as transparent with you as possible and answer all the questions you have. So thanks everyone. Love you so much.